On today's Locked On Texans podcast, Cameron Wolfe of the NFL Network joins the show to discuss the Miami Dolphins ahead of Saturday's preseason game.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Hump Day episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to everybody that checks the show out Monday through Friday, stopping by once again to talk Texan. If you are new to the Locked On Texan podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texan podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And as always, I am your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman, joined by none other than Cody M stands for Mama Davis, Texan reporter, credential media member, and writer for Sports Illustrated, as we are joined by Cameron Wolfe of the NFL Network to discuss the Miami Dolphins.
Yes, sir. I had an opportunity to catch up with Cameron Wolfe, national TV reporter for the NFL Network, who shares some insight on what is going on or what has been going on with the Miami Dolphins as they prepare to take on the Houston Texans, not only for Saturday's preseason game, but for 2 joint practices. So, Cameron, can you start by telling us what have you been hearing about the Dolphins coming out of training camp as they prepare for their 2-day joint practice against the Houston Texans?
Yeah, Cody, I've actually watched most of the Dolphins practices this offseason. And, the buzz around this team is it's the most talented team they've had maybe since Dan Marino's there. You have the talent they bring back, like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua. And then you add Jalen Ramsey along with Vic Fangio, their new defensive coordinator, and a couple other additions. And there's an optimism buzzing here. And then second day of training camp hits and Jalen Ramsey goes down with a significant knee injury, torn meniscus that's going to leave him out until at least late in the season. And so that took a little bit of the buzz out of the team. But I think this is a team that still expects to be a playoff team competing for that AFC East. That offense, once again, should be explosive. And the big question surrounding them is, can they keep their quarterback, number one, healthy? He missed 5 games last year with that concussion. And so they've been doing a lot. They've been trying to have him do jiu-jitsu in the offseason to learn how to fall, transfer his energy to the ground. He's been trying out new helmets to try to help and minimize those concussions as well. And I'm told he's added a bunch of muscle and weight overall to his frame as well. So those are some things that the quarterback's trying to do. But the reality is we won't know until the season goes about if he can stay healthy. But the biggest visual difference I can tell is you can already start to see some of the scheme differences that the Dolphins defense is putting together with Vic Fangio. And that should be a much improved unit on that side of the ball.
You talked about the defense and Vic. Can you just talk about what you have been seeing from that defensive side of the ball? Because down here in the city of Houston, one of the things that I think a lot of people are excited about is because it gives our rookie quarterback, CJ Stroud, an opportunity to go up against a defense and a team that's not his teammates, and he gets an opportunity to kind of go through his reads with different packages and just a whole entire defense in general.
Yeah, this will be a different challenge for CJ, and one that probably is one that could be trouble for a rookie quarterback. So Vic Fangio's scheme, in essence, is very much of different disguises. And what they've done, even in their limited reps of showing us their scheme in practice, is they've shown us very similar snap looks before the snap. Once the snap hits, they switch into their defense. It's a lot of early disguises. They always show a cover 2 zone shell, and then they switch to something else. And when you do that, you really confuse the quarterback's eyes, and you force them to make decisions in a very short period of time. And so I've seen the Dolphins defense really get after the Dolphins offense really over the last week and a half with that scheme. They've really forced some rough days on the offensive line with their pressure fronts, with the twists and games they play up front. And so Texans have a really good offensive line. I really like what they built there. So I'm eager to see how they can handle some of those pass rushers up front, your Jalen Phillips, your Bradley Chubb, and then your Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer inside. It's a really good front versus a really good offensive line. And so I'm eager to see that. But CJ is going to have certainly quite a few difficult scheme looks to look at. And I think that's what makes the Dolphins defense definitely more of a challenge to face this year.
You can't talk about Miami without mentioning Tua and this explosive offense. So now let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball. What have you seen from Miami's offense, and what kind of growth have you seen from Tua as he enters year 4?
Well, first of all, Tyreek Hill still can't be covered. I've watched him several weeks now, and trust me, I have no further update than Tyreek Hill is still him. He's still the guy that you imagine him to be. He said he's going to go for 2,000 yards and break the NFL receiving record. And who am I to doubt him? I watch him break open against whatever defenders against him every day in practice. And so Tyreek Hill is still unstoppable. But the Dolphins offense has very much been a very boom or bust offense through training camp, especially the last couple of weeks. When they aren't getting the ball to Tyreek Hill, they've struggled to move the ball consistently. And their offensive line in particular has given up a lot of quarterback pressure. Tua has looked good so far this camp. I'd say he has a good camp, but I'd say over the last week, the offense has struggled a bit. They've scuttled. Jalen Waddle went down with a core injury during the Atlanta Falcons joint practices last week, and we haven't seen him since. And since then, it's been very much Tyreek or nothing offense. And so they fell into a little bit of that last year, where it's very much the big plays, and they got themselves in trouble. They want to run the ball better this year. Mike McDaniel promised his running backs he'd run more. They were 31st in attempts last year, and so I'm eager to see what he does there. But I think Tua right now, they're trying to figure out who their secondary weapons will be. We know Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are going to eat. Who steps up as that third receiving weapon? Is it one of the running backs like Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson or Devon Achane, the rookie who they like a lot? Or is it going to be one of the secondary receivers like Braxton Berrios or Robbie Chosen, who they picked up in free agency, or Cedric Wilson? That's something that they're still figuring out, and nobody's really separated themselves. So another week of joint practice, another week of preseason for them to figure that out. And the Texans defense gives them another good challenge, because I really like Jalen Petrie out there. You get Derek Stingley. That secondary is going to have some fun battles between those receivers.
Yeah, man, this defense is something special. As a matter of fact, following Monday's day of training camp, they are up to, I think, 13 takeaways and about 10 interceptions. And Steven Nelson got like 4 all by himself alone. So, Cameron, along those same lines, every time we, look up anything that got to do with the Miami Dolphins down here in the city of Houston, we get the same names. You know, the big four, as I like to call them. But who are some of the other guys who are kind of falling under the radar throughout Dolphins training camp?
Well, I'll start with one guy who shouldn't be under the radar. Christian Wilkins has been one of, if not their best player throughout training camp. He has been dominant. He's a big defense tackle in the middle. He hasn't had big sack numbers, so I think people forget about him. But if you ask offensive coordinators who they're worried about, they talk about 94 and Aqua. And so he's actually due a big contract extension this offseason. He's playing on his 5th-year option, but he is a monster inside, and he's a guy that really disrupts centers and guards consistently. And his buddy Zach Sealer, who's also even more underrated as far as name value, is also a guy that wreaks havoc inside. So those two guys, you're probably going to hear their name in joint practices quite a bit. And then on the back end, Javon Holland is a really good safety. He's kind of similar to Jalen Petrie. He's a year older as far as the game, but I think both of those players are going to be considered one of the top safeties in football in due time. And so Jalen Petrie's probably got a little bit further to go, but Javon Holland in his year 3 has already kind of popped up as a name for some people in the league, but I think as far as a national name, he's not there yet. So Javon Holland on that defense side of the ball, as well as Jalen Phillips, their edge rusher. Those are two guys that could be in the midst of breakout seasons. And I'll give you one more on that side of the ball. Cater Kohu. He was an undrafted cornerback for them a year ago. He started a lot of games. He was supposed to fall back a little bit and roll with Jalen Ramsey coming in, but now Jalen Ramsey's hurt, and you need somebody else to step up. And so Cater Kohu, Xavier Howard tells me he's a dog. He's one of their guys that they trust, and you're going to see him in a lot of those battles against some of the Texans receivers. And on the offensive side of the ball, I told you they're trying to figure out some of their weapons and who's going to step up as a secondary weapon. But the one guy who has flashed consistently has been the rookie I mentioned, Devon Achane. He's their running back. They drafted him in the 3rd round, Texas kid out of Texas A&M. He's small. He's probably about 5'7", 5'8", 180, 185 pounds, but he is super fast. He is part of probably the NFL's fastest offense. Him, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, all are 4.2 or 4.3 guys. They talk about they can run a 4x4 track team with all that speed. And so he's a guy on the offensive side of the ball that'll probably catch your eye as well, that you may not know his name.
Awesome. Sounds good. Cameron, last question before getting out of here. In general, when you take a look at the Miami Dolphins as a whole, and I think I know where you're going to go with this answer, but do you think this is going to be the year Miami finally take that jump into championship contention?
I think they have the talent too. I think health is the big concern, right? We talked about Tua staying healthy. I can't promise you that Tua is going to stay healthy. I have no crystal ball. That's something like I can tell you how they look on offense, tell you how they look on defense. You ask me if Tua is going to stay healthy. I don't know. I know that he's trying and they're doing everything they can. But if you tell me that Tua is going to play 17 games this season, then I will tell you that the Dolphins should be a championship contender. That's how I feel about this team. I feel like they have the talent to do it. I feel like this team, when healthy, can go neck and neck with the Bills for the AFC East title with the Jets there as well. And I can certainly see them winning the division. And if you win your division, then you're right there with the rest of the AFC teams trying to compete for that championship. And so a healthy Tua for 17 games, a championship contender. If no healthy Tua, then no, they'll struggle to make the playoffs.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Wednesday installment of Locked On Texans. Once again, that was Cameron Wolfe, national TV reporter for NFL Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe, and Wolfe is spelled W-O-L-F-E. John, today marks the first of 2 days of joint practices for the Houston Texans. I'm really excited about it because you heard Cameron talk about it. You know, I think the biggest important factor of joint practices is, of course, the rookie quarterback, CJ Stroud himself. As Cameron put it, Vic's defensive scheme can be tricky for a rookie quarterback. And I like that because the quicker he learns, the quicker he get adjusted, the better he will be, not just for the 2023 campaign, but for the rest of his entire career.
I think this is an awesome opportunity for CJ Stroud's learning, development, and curve right now, guys. And simply because let's look at some of the things that we know Vic Fangio loves to do. In Fangio's last season with the Broncos back in 2021, before he was let go, he took a year off a little bit in between time, but ended up consulting the Philadelphia Eagles in that defense, and we saw how good they were, especially with Jordan Davis. But if you go back to the last full year as a coach, Denver finished first in the NFL in using 2 high safety shells. For reference, Miami finished 32nd in 2 high safety shells usage in 2021 and 22. But Fangio's defense loves to limit the big plays downfield. So for reference, back during the 2021 season, Fangio last season, catches of at least 20 yards or more, 48, which was tied for 12th fewest in the NFL. His Denver defense never finished higher than 13th in the NFL blitz rates, according to Sports Info Solutions. Here's another advantage of CJ Stroud being able to take this game as a learning lesson. But Ryans, McDaniels, Slowick, they were all part of the Niners coaching staff at the time. So this is an excellent opportunity for Stroud to make plays versus a defensive coordinator who has an advantage over you because of the system you're in, and his head coach is going to run into some of the similar things. And so let me tell you why I like this, man. This is an opportunity to get the reps against a defense that wants to beat you by the sky. So Cody and listeners, we talked about CJ Stroud getting the ball out quickly, taking what the defense gives him. Then what better team to do it against than the Miami Dolphins right now that's led by Vic Fangio. We know he'll be eager to establish his defense. You want to see CJ make those adjustments at the line of scrimmage and audibles out there if need be. Fangio is known to run that cover 4 defense, cover 6 defense, and then disguise it as something else. And at the last second, again, after the snap, then your DB is doing this, your safety is doing this, your linebacker is not drop covering the flats anymore. He's covering maybe the corner curl. So you love to see the different types of coverages potentially that CJ Stroud will be seeing, that mixing up, because overall you want to see him get better. Also, something that I picked up on years ago, I didn't know the name of it, for the offensive line who needs to have a better outing. Laramie Tunsil should be playing this game. Then we'll see more of a fuller offensive line. I'm eager to see how they handle that 6-1 tilt where they have 6 of their defensive linemen pitched in with a linebacker sitting right on top of them. That's normally how they try to, between Vic Fangio's and his defense, how he tries to limit some of the comfortability of the offensive line, which in turn, that throws off the entire comfortability of the offense. If your offensive line cannot protect and block for your quarterback or block for your running back, well, I can't wait to talk about Dameon Pierce, then that's going to cause some disruption and nobody's going to get comfortable throughout the entire night. So I'm looking at this as a situation for CJ. I want to see him play at least a quarter and a half, but I love the fact that he's going up against an aged, veteran, stellar defensive coordinator who has been known to utilize pre- and post-snap defenses and looks and disguises to throw off your quarterback. I want to see how CJ adjusts from the college level of defense to the NFL level of defenses when everything may not look to be what it seems.
For me, I'm just looking at defense, but for the Houston Texans, ever since the start of training camp. Matter of fact, ever since the start of OTAs, I came on this show, wrote about it on Sports Illustrated of how good this defense has looked, period, point blank. As I told Cameron, I'm going to repeat it again. Today marks day 15 of training camp, and the Houston Texans defense alone has a total of 13 takeaways. But that is going up against an offense where you have a rookie quarterback taking first team reps and you have a depleted offensive line. When you look at the Miami Dolphins, you take a look at their speed. You just heard Cameron said, you look at it from a standpoint, this is definitely going to be an opportunity for this defense to get a true test, especially for that secondary, seeing how they cover these wide receivers, man. I cannot wait to see it. That is something I'm definitely going to keep my eyes set on for the next 2 days of joint practices at the Houston Methodist Training Center. John, I agree with you. I think CJ Stroud, I would be okay if he plays a whole entire half on Saturday because he definitely needs to get into the rhythm of playing football on the NFL level. All the starters, as a matter of fact. And one last thing before moving on, I'm excited to see Coach D'Amico Ryans and offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik get that extra time during these joint practices to get accustomed to calling plays and making quote unquote in-game adjustments. And I'm using that in air quotation marks only because we know that both of these teams is going to be giving it their all doing 11 on 11. Hopefully no fights break out, but the last 2 days of training camp for the Texans has been a little bit different. But I really believe that everything that we have been saying for the Houston Texans, both good and bad, this is an opportunity for them to continue to improve or clean up some of those mishaps.
Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. Got a lot from Cameron Wolfe. Got a lot of that conversation from the joint practice preview, what Cody and I are looking forward to overall. That speed for the Miami Dolphins, I mean, it kills. And so Steven Nelson, Derek Stingley is going to have his hands full. He had an opportunity to go up against some fast guys, but I think now that he's going to be able to cover them, when they drafted him, how do you feel about covering the number one guy? Now he's going to be able to do that full time, right? And so I'm excited to see that. I'm anticipating those matchups between Derek Stingley and some of these number ones, especially those with that speed. But for Houston, they are going to get a full team versus the Dolphins on Saturday. No Titus Howard, of course, but I presume Laramie Tunsil will be out on the field. Dameon Pierce will be out on the field. So you get a better look at that offensive line and that run game. And then you should see more of Robert Woods. You should see more of Noah Brown, the full team versus the Miami Dolphins. Cody, what are you looking forward to?
Once again, just like I mentioned in that second segment, it's mainly more so on the offensive side of the ball because that is where we have been seeing a lot of the struggles. Like, for example, I came on the show a couple of days ago and talked about how Noah Brown hasn't really done much in training camp. Yeah, he caught a couple receptions here and there, but it's not enough for him to live up to that. What is he getting paid? Like $10.5 million for this whole entire season? Like, it's just not enough. Like, I want to see more. And in terms of Noah Brown, I believe out of the 14 days of training camp, he has been one of the most consistent wide receivers in the passing game. Now I want to see him go up against another defense to see whether or not he could continue that consistency. The same with Nico Collins as well. And John, you just finished talking about Derek Stingley Jr. I think this is going to be the true test. And when you was talking about Miami speed, I kept saying, I'm a little bit scared. Only because I've seen Nico Collins beat Derek Stingley Jr. on a couple of occasions throughout training camp. And I look at that from a standpoint, hopefully, like the Texans' favorite saying these days, iron sharpens iron. Hopefully, hopefully he has had an opportunity to adjust his speed or do whatever he has to do in order to not get beat, because early in training camp, Nico Collins did have his numbers. And I'm looking at that from a standpoint, if Nico's beating him, what you think Tyreek Hill is going to do to him?
One of the things I'm looking forward to, just the run game and getting Larry Tunsil out there. The unfair judgment and criticism that came to CJ Stroud with George Fant and Austin Ekeler out there, I don't think that's going to be the case. You got one of, if not the best left tackle in the league. You got Trent Williams out there. You also got Andrew Thomas from New York, but bar none, Larry Tunsil was no lower than third on their left tackle list. Get him there on the field. Damian Pierce, you get some good looks at him and get him in the action. So that's a part of that run game. And he's a player that Houston has really, throughout training camp, Houston has really made sure that they work in, whether that's on the ground or through the air. I'm looking forward to a full offense and how they establish the run. Regardless of how we feel about Tank Dell, about John Mechie, about Nick Collins, this team from day one has mentioned how they want to establish the run. So I want to see that with your starting running back. I want to see that with majority 4 out of 5 of your offensive linemen that starts on the field. That's what I want to see.
And I do want to mention this before moving on. I think one of the other things I'm going to be looking at is how this tight end core can actually help with the run protection, with the pass protection, because this offensive line, unfortunately, is depleted. However, you look at a guy like TQ, there's been moments we talked about his attribute as a run blocker. We talked about Dalton Schultz, Jordan Murray, a guy who has looked really good throughout training camp. I want to see if these guys can not only stay consistent, but see if they can live up to all the things that we have been praising them for. And this tight end core, this is going to be a really good opportunity for somebody like Jordan Murray, who has been one of the most consistent guys in that position group due to all the injuries that they have been dealing with. So that is another thing that I want to make sure I keep an eye out on as well.
Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Locked On Texans, and also subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube as well.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.